Our next speaker for the day is Shantanu Joshi. Shantanu is a research associate at NCBS. He is also the founding editor of a citizen science-based website, indianodonata.org, whose aim is to understand ecology and distribution of dragonflies and damselflies across the country using user-uploaded observations. Today, he's going to talk to us about Odonata of India, studying dragonflies and damselflies of India through citizen science.
Hi everyone, this is Shantanu Joshi, and today I'm going to talk about contribution of citizen science in studying Indian odonats. And specifically, I'm going to talk about a case study on polymorphism in a family of dragonflies called Libellulidae. Just to give a brief introduction, Odonata is an order of insects, more commonly known as dragonflies and damselflies, and they are ecologically sensitive bioindicator taxa because, as some of you might know, they'll spend half of their lives in water. They lay eggs in water, develop as larvae in water, and then they emerge as adults that we see usually flying around. And that's why they are considered a good indicator taxa for freshwater ecosystems. There are around 6,300 species known worldwide, out of which 480 species have been reported from India so far. And to give you an idea of the threat status for dragonflies, this is a chart from the IPBS report that came out last year. And this gives out the different IUCN red list categories for the proportion of different IUCN status for different groups. And if you see for dragonflies, a very high proportion of species are data deficient. So data deficient essentially means that there is not enough information available to classify it as any of the IUCN categories, and that's why it's data deficient. So this is quite worrying, and this can be changed with enough information on distribution and population sizes of these species. Uh, and so citizen science is very applicable and very useful in studying odonats because they are considered as birdwatchers insects. So they're very easy to observe. They're very conspicuous, as you might have seen. There's a relatively modest number of species. As I said, there are about 480 species in India. But if you compare this with like beetles and wasps, this is very less. And this can be an advantage when you're trying to identify species by images. There is also a very active community of experts and citizen scientists collaborating with each other through initiatives such as DragonflySouthAsia, which is an informal group, which it's a Facebook group and also mailing list. And to assimilate this process of citizen scientists contributing to dragonflies and damselfly studies, we started this website in 2014 called Odonata of India. And we have covered 295 species so far out of the 480. So these are how many species we have photos of from different contributors. And we have around 11,000 photos contributed so far. And some highlights that have come out from all the contributions that people have done are 3 new species that were published within the last 3 years with our collaborators. And additionally, at least 10 species have been added to the Indian checklist with the help of different contributors and their records. So these are 2 species which were recently added to the Indian checklist, for example. And these 2 species were added by this family called Veno family, who live in Dimapur, which is in Nagaland. And these are their 2 kids, Lightson and Rakoven. And they, as a family, they have been observing dragonflies and damselflies in their backyard and wherever they go to their native village in Manipur and so on. And they had some really, really interesting observations. So they could observe species which were not known from India or which were completely new species. So I visited them in 2017 and we did some sampling in their areas, and we published these 2 papers based on that. So on this first paper, we published some new records to India and some very interesting species which were not reported since more than 100 years also. And even the young Rakovene, who was 8 years old at that time, was author on that paper. So we have really been trying to collaborate with citizen scientists and do a capacity building exercise and not just have them as contributors, but also have them as collaborators and colleagues. So another example of this is Datta Prasad Sawant, who is a doctor by profession from Mumbai, and he's originally from Sindhudurg, and he goes there quite a lot for just photography and so on. And while one such trip, he observed this damselfly and he sent me the photos. And after working on it for some time and after looking at it under a microscope, we figured out that it's actually a completely new species. and it looks although similar to this common species, but it's a new species on its own, and we published this last year. And in another instance, similarly, we published a new species of dragonfly from Western Maharashtra, which was published only last month. So these are just a couple of examples to show that citizen scientists have been really significantly contributing to studying diversity of dragonflies and damselflies. And to talk specifically about the topic of today, I'll start with talking about colors. So colors are really important for dragonflies because they have a very well developed color vision, and they rely heavily on visual cues for their survival in general. And they also show a lot of variety of colors across different groups, but also across a single species. So this is, of course, the variation that you see across different groups. These are two dragonflies. This is a dragonfly. All of them are damselfly. But you can also see a lot of interspecific variation where the females go through different stages of coloration and finally acquire adult coloration. So these are 5 female individuals, and these are 3 male individuals exhibiting the color variation in this species called splendid dartlet. And there is also another type of color variation which is known as polymorphism, which is more common in females, at least in dragonflies and damselflies, where 2 forms typically occur. One is a form which looks like the male, which is called the andromorph, and the other female form is called the heteromorph, which is different from the male coloration. So this is a species called Senegal golden dartlet, which is very common even in India. And you can see that this form is the male-like form, and this is the female-like form. And this is more common in damselflies, and it was not really reported for any South Asian dragonfly species, very, very few species. So we recorded 89 such females from 5 species of dragonflies, and I'll show you images in a couple of slides. But importantly, 62 of these 89 records were from citizen scientists. So essentially, majority of the records of our study were from citizen science portals and contributed by citizen scientists. And such females were never reported for 4 out of the 5 species in our study. And we could also describe the variation in color in very detail because we had such high number of observations. And just to give you an idea of the spread of different sources for our observations. So first, we have a bunch of different Facebook groups. So these are dragonflies and damselflies of worldwide Odonata, dragonflies of Kerala, DragonflysouthAsia. These are Facebook groups, but we also had observations from Flickr, iNaturalist, and Odonata of India. iNaturalist had highest number of observations because also it's a worldwide website. But if you look at from number of records from India, then the Odonata of India website and the Facebook group DragonflysouthAsia had the highest number of observations. To talk about the actual species, I'll talk only about the 2 species for which we have the highest number of observations of andromorph females. To explain what exactly is this andromorph female. So this is a species called scarlet skimmer, another common species found around marshlands and ponds. So the males are always very bright, and the females are generally this yellow coloration with black. The males, when they are very freshly emerged from water, from the larval stage, they look like females, and then they go through a series of color changes, and in a couple of days they acquire this adult coloration. But females don't do that. They always retain their coloration, which is this yellow dull coloration. But what we saw in past few years was that a lot of people were photographing and recording these females which look like males. So these are what are called as andromorph females, and we have total 51 observations in this species. And you can see even in these andromorph females, there is a lot of variation. So you can see this female in particular has a very patchy coloration, whereas this female is very dark. It's even darker than some of the males that we see, especially the wing patches and so on. Whereas this female resembles more the immature males. So immature males are also like this. They're very faint colored, somewhere in between the yellow and the red. So this is a very interesting set of observations that shows that these females actually have a lot of color variation that is never reported in literature anywhere so far. And another such species was this crimson marsh glider, which is again similar, where the males are red and the females are yellow, much duller. And males do look like females when they're younger, but females don't go through any color changes. But what we saw was that there were a lot of photographs available, and people have recorded such females which look like males. So here you can clearly see that these are females because of their anal appendages, but they have male-like coloration. If you compare it with this female, they are completely different. And we could find 25 instances of such females occurring. Uh, so another interesting phenomena that we reported in our paper is, this is known from insects. This is known as bilateral gynandromorphs. So what happens here is that due to some developmental errors, due to some errors in the developmental pathways, one half of the body is developed as a male and the other half is developed as a female, especially the coloration and the patterns. So these are some examples from the Lepidoptera order, and this is from a review paper. But you can see that the differences are really, really stark, and this is very unusual. Because these individuals cannot really survive very well. This occurs very, very rarely. And in dragonflies and damselflies, this was only known for about 20 to 25 individuals across all 6,000 species, and this has not been recorded anywhere in India so far. So we reported this recently for this species called ditch jewel, where the male generally looks like this and the female looks like this. But a contributor called Janice Patel, he photographed this male which has both coloration. So this is a bilateral gynandromorph male, and this is the first instance of this phenomena occurring in this species, where you can see the left side is colored like the male and the right side is colored like the female. And this is again very interesting, and we could only report this because of the contribution of citizen scientists. So to summarize, it is also important to note that polymorphic species are more widespread and abundant according to a recent study. So us publishing this information on these species being polymorphic also adds a very important adds important information on this ecological trait. And our study is one of the few to use biodiversity records in this unique way, and it is also one of the first to use images from citizen scientists to actually describe color variation in dragonflies. So I would like to thank all my co-authors who were on this study, and Datta Prasad, Sagar, Indushekar, and Rajesh for their photos, Anuja and Krushnamegh for their comments, and NCBS for their support to the website. And I will also like you to request you all to upload your observations to our website, which is indianodonata.org. And thank you.
Hi, Shantanu.
Yeah, hi.
Thank you for that talk. Very cool work.
Thanks.
We have a few questions. A comment from Nishant, who says, how much do you depend on images and observations from Facebook groups?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. So even, when I started with studying dragonflies, or when I got interested in butterflies or dragonflies back in 2012, we depended really heavily on Facebook for identification or getting opinions from experts. So I still rely on it, but I agree that as a tool to do citizen science, it's not very convenient. It's not very easy. I have talked a lot with Vijay Barve also, who's an expert on these things, but it's not very convenient to work with Facebook. But still, we use it a lot because there's a big audience there who's getting interested, who want to get their species identified or want to interact with experts. So there is a very active community, but yeah, it's still a difficult sort of platform to work with.
Okay. We have a slightly species-specific question from Paul Pop, who says, how do you differentiate between andromorphic females and males in Crocothemis cervilia? Eye color, cell spot color?
So yeah, that's one of the two species that I showed in the presentation. There is actually, unfortunately, because this has never been really reported, so there are no key diagnostic characters, because this is just a developing sort of thing that we don't really know why this is occurring and how exactly this is occurring. So right now, the only character we know is that when the colors are like the male, we call it andromorph, at least in this species. So because the females are usually yellow, so if you find a female which is like orange or red, it's clearly an andromorph female. But so as I said, this was never reported for this species, but we found around 50 such observations when we pooled all of our observations together. So yeah, it's a developing question of like what exactly would you call an andromorph and why is it happening?
I see. Okay. I have a question while we're waiting for other questions to come in. Since you have kind of a small, let's assume, or at least focused audience that studies dragonflies, do you do some kind of targeted events? Say, from a particular place, a regional drive or an event to increase the number of observations from there?
Yeah, so actually I talked about the group Dragonfly South Asia. So we are a bunch of people, researchers from India who work on dragonflies. So we have been organizing the annual meets, which happen in different places. It happened in Goa, it happened in Central India. So at that time, anybody can come participate there, and we take workshops and we help people with going a little deeper into it. And with the Biodiversity Atlas team, so our website comes under Biodiversity Atlas, which is the initiative from NCBS. We have also been organizing some biodiversity marathons. So because of COVID, we couldn't do any much this year. But last year we did one in Thane, in Mumbai, and there have been few in Bangalore as well, and one in Kolkata.
Okay.
So we're planning to do that, but yeah, we haven't been able to do a lot of that because a lot of our audience is also scattered throughout the country, and like online is sort of the only easiest way to get them motivated in a way.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Shantanu. I'd like to ask you to go to Slack and answer more questions. There are more species-specific questions that are coming in.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.